Today, we're talking about this one. This is The Extreme. And this is an interesting book because it's our first ghost-written book. That's right, the first of many ghost-written books. And I do apologise that I probably won't be able to pronounce this name correctly, but the ghostwriter is named Jeffrey Ziulk. Jeffrey Ziulk. If I'm pronouncing that wrong, I do apologise. So we now enter the predominantly ghost-written section of the books. How does it start? Because the ghostwriters, as we know, are notorious for being a bit iffy at times. But I will say, it's a good start to the ghost-written... What are we going to call it? The ghost-written saga? We'll come up with a name for it. Marco has a date with a girl called Marion. And the first chapter is just him drooling over and ogling this Marion girl as the most popular girl in his school. Chapter 2 starts with him having failed to impress her. What a shame. There's this whole thing about how she was into classical music, he pretended to be, and he fell asleep during this Beethoven's Third Symphony or something like that. I'm not a classical person myself, really. Does this have any relevance to the book? No. Not. From what I can tell, no. It's just an amusing first chapter, and it's just something to go in between the parts where he's just saying, oh, the Yerks are these things, and the Andalites are those things, and we're these things too. Yeah. But it does mean that in chapter 2, where Marco and Cassie are talking about his experience with Marion, the beautiful Marion, Eric comes along. Now we know Eric, he is the Chi, or one of the Chi, he's an android, and he's almost the Animorphs informant. What happened last time Eric was the informant for this lot? Well, he did a pretty poor job of informing them. In fact, he did such a poor job that he led them into a trap. And he did such a poor job that part of me is convinced that he's a double agent and that he did it on purpose. So what's he brought for the Animorphs this time? I will just say that I've just realised every time Eric appears, it's in a Marco book. I'm not sure if that's going to be consistent. I don't think it is. But yeah, every time Eric's appeared, it has been a Marco book. It's either ended in a 0 or a 5 in terms of numbers. Besides the point. So Eric comes along and says, right, the Yerks are building a satellite dish, which means they can project Kandrona rays to every body of water. And they're saying that means that backyard swimming pools can be turned into Yerk pools, and people can just go outside into their backyard and do the whole thing. This raises several questions. Okay, so what do we notice about the Yerk, the actual Yerk pool? Right, there are Hawkbajir, usually, that will hold down a host body. Because when the Yerk exits the host body, the host goes, oh, what is this? Oh, what you do? And so they have to be restrained. Okay, so if every backyard in the world became a Yerk pool, and the Yerk drops into the pool, what's the host going to do? Oh, what is this? And there's going to be, we assume, no Hawkbajir there to restrain them because they're out in the fucking open. They can't risk them seeing that. It wouldn't work, would it, Eric? It's not practical. Not only that, but did you know that 40% of American swimming pools are located in California and Florida alone? Yes, that's right. If this were to be the case and it was backyards that were the new Yerk pools because of swimming pools, then it's only really California and Florida that are going to have a problem. So, are the Yerks planning on taking geriatrics and insane people as their primary hosts? I realise that it's about bodies of water, and the swimming pool thing is just the thing that they happen to hyper-focus on. If any body of water can be turned into a Yerk pool, then you're talking your lakes, streams, rivers, even though that wouldn't be practical for a Yeerk's point of view because the water's going that way. But it does make me wonder, Eric and the Chee, are they double agents? Because this just doesn't seem practical. Why would the Yeerks need this? You need then extra infrastructure to guard bodies of water so that regular people can't come and see what's going on. There are a lot of problems with that in terms of practicality and usefulness. The Yeerk pool seems to be doing just fine, as far as we know. So, I'm convinced that Eric's a double agent and he's just feeding them bullshit to get him into trouble, which we will see in a bit. I will mention on page 13 as well, Marco is doing a little monologue bit and he's saying, "We've imagined destroying the Yeerk pool. It would be a huge blow to the Yeerks. And we would if we could, but the place is about the size of a football stadium. We've established in previous books that it's the size of multiple football stadiums, but, you know." And then it continues, "With better defences than the White House, the Pentagon and Fort Knox put together." Seriously. You do remember that you've infiltrated the Yeerk pool 3 times, at least? One time, you literally just walked in. And you're saying this is better defences than the White House, Fort Knox, and the other one, which I can't remember, combined? I get the feeling that this is one of those little moments where the ghostwriter has stumbled a little bit. Eric, despite having gathered this information on this satellite, conveniently doesn't know where it is. But he knows where the Visser is being picked up in order to go there. Apparently. Well done, Eric, I suppose. But he tells them where the Visser is likely to be before he gets picked up. So the Animorphs go along and they go in as fly morphs, because they understand that the best way to get onto the Visser is to go underneath and be relatively inconspicuous. So they go in as fly. And this is another moment on page 25 where I think the ghostwriters just had a little bit of a stumble in terms of consistency with the whole series we have so far. "My wings, now pale flesh like a plucked chicken's, began to shrink and disappear into my shoulder blades. I could feel the bones in my legs, sploot, suddenly fingers. I could feel them twitching, but they were attached to my shoulders. My arms sprouted out of my torso like plants growing out of the ground in time-lapse photography." Right. I know it's another one of my little nitpicks, but it's never been done like this before. When it comes to homologous structures, homologous and anatomical features, they tend to just change as they are. So, if, for instance, I was an Animorph, my left arm, you're seeing it as my right, of course, my left arm, and I'm morphing an elephant. The fingers would change, the arm would change, but the arm is still there. It's not disappearing. It's a homologous structure. It's got the same bones, it's the same origins, the same genetic origins. And the wing of a bird is a homologous structure to the human arm. So the ghostwriter has made it so that the wing shoots back into the torso, so he's got no arms or no wings or similar structure. And then they just sprout back out his arms from his torso. It's just never been done like that before. So that was a little bit that seemed like, pretty sure that was one of the ghostwriter's little fumbles there. But again, it's a minor point. And to be fair, I'm looking at my notes. Those ones that I've covered so far, that's basically it for ghostwriter mistakes. It's probably the shortest list. And I'm looking at it thinking, wow, so the first ghostwriter book, and it's had the fewest inconsistencies. It's like, mind blown. Visser 3 enters a bug fighter. And this is where we realise, oh shit, maybe we should have thought about this a bit more. They go on the bug fighter and they're thinking, right, now what? Thankfully for them, they end up on the Blade ship. The bug fighter goes up, connects to the Blade ship, etc. Visser goes off into his torture chamber. Yes, we visit Visser's torture chamber. Now, I can't remember which book it was first mentioned in. I believe it was book 20, the last Marco book, where it was mentioned that Visser 3 had a room dedicated to torturing his underlings. And as they're in this room, they see Iron Maidens on the wall and various other torture devices. And I'm looking at it thinking, I love this little consistency, this little Easter egg. This is torture chamber. We're actually in it now. And I love it. It's great. But yeah, Visser 3 is in there. And the Animorphs overhear, or Axe overhears Gallard from the Taxon, I believe, talking to the Visser, telling him what's going on. Turns out that they're flying somewhere within Earth's atmosphere, which means they're going to be moving slower, and it's going to take them about 3.5 hours to get to their destination. Oh, fuck-a-diddle. Jake has to obviously come to a decision here. The original plan is to wait for Visser to go somewhere else. Plan B was to do something else, of course. That turns out to be calling in random Hawk-Bajir guards repeatedly, to the point where Visser 3 gets so annoyed that he storms off, basically. And it works. One of the Hawk-Bajir is unfortunately knocked unconscious, but from the way it's told, he doesn't really suffer much more than that. Then the Animorphs, this is a funny little part here, because they're thinking to themselves, okay, plan B is likely to result in somebody's death. Just so that we can get out of this room to carry on with this little mission that we've been given. I think the little message behind this little bit here is how far the Animorphs are willing to go to achieve a goal. They're more than willing at this point, because things are starting to look a bit dodgy, they're more than happy to risk the lives of Visser 3's crew, which, I mean, it goes without saying really that, yeah, there's a Yerk, but there are also innocent hosts involved here. And the Animorphs are willing to risk the lives of the innocent hosts in order that they can progress with their mission. And this is a theme that's played around quite a bit in this book, but it's not it's not a new theme. We've covered this sort of stuff before. It's just put into a different setting. And I will say at this point, regarding the book's message, it's nothing more than that. You know, sometimes you have to do things that you don't want to in order to achieve your goal. You've got to do things that you would consider abhorrent in any other circumstance. You would do those things in order to persevere. And yeah, we've had that message before, so we get no new message here in this book, which I don't think it's surprising that that's what happens in the first Ghost written book. Regardless, now that the Visser has left, the Animorphs quickly demorph and remorph. The Taxon comes in, but Axe immediately just deals with this Taxon in the best way he knows how. And as flies, they zoom out. Visser comes back, sees this dead Taxon and this unconscious Hawk-Bajir, and suddenly he puts it together. Oh shit, the Andalite bandits are here. And then all these Hawk-Bajir come rushing out. The Animorphs follow a series of lights along the ceiling, which takes them to a storage area. And in there, they demorph back to their normal forms, normal bodies. And they see these containers, these ice-like containers. And it contains an alien race called the Vember. And this is mentioned a couple of times. The Visser mentioned it when he was talking to the Taxon, but Axe was like, did he just say Vember? That's not possible. And then they enter this storage room and see the Vember, and Axe says, the Vember, but that's not possible. He does that a few times throughout this book, and you just think, Axe, just fucking get a grip. But yeah, we've got these things, and apparently they live in like fucking minus 200 degrees, and I'm imagining, because we're talking America, that's in Fahrenheit, which is pretty ruddy cold. It might be in Celsius for the English print versions, I don't know. Anyway, the Animorphs don't really know why these Vember are there. They don't know why the Visser wants them particularly, but they're there, and there's loads of these containers. The doors open, and all these Hawk-Bajir controllers are there. Visser 3 turns up, does his little mustache twirl, little villainous mustache twirl. And Jake, I don't know what's happened to Jake recently. Ever since the David trilogy, Jake has just gone from sort of leader. Now he's just, yeah, back fucking straightforward. He's the leader. He's your guy. And he does it again in this book. Most of the decisions he makes in this book and all the orders he's given out are brilliant. And he's just developed this quite recently after the David trilogy, funnily enough. And he throws out orders when this happens. All these Hork-Bajir here, and Jake just says, right, you do that. You do thing B. X, Y, Z. And everybody knows their place at this point. Everybody knows what they're doing after just a few seconds of Jake coming to a decision, delegating out these tasks, and they know what they're doing, and they escape with their lives. Jake, fucking grade A, mate. Rachel knocks into one of these Vember canisters, all this mist comes out, and a lot of these Hork-Bajir, they're like, all the legs are frozen. And this mist now comes across the floor. And one of Rachel's paws gets frozen off as she's trying to save Cassie, who with Jake and Tobias went to go attack the Visser. Axe and Marco are tasked with opening the rear door, the door aft, which will lead outside of the ship. And basically, instead of doing anything technical, they just fucking take a hammer and... you know how a hammer solves every problem? Bang. Basically that. Gorilla Fist and Axe Tail Blade solves the problem there, and the door opens. Great. Lovely. Slightly convenient, but okay. I understand the message of hit it till it works again. There's a little bit here that at first I thought nothing of, but as we come to the latter part of the book, I think it becomes relevant. I think it might just be a coincidence, but the Hork-Bajir have seen some of their fellows getting their legs frozen off, and I don't know, fucking arms becoming iced up. They're seeing that, and they know that this mist is not very healthy for them. And the Visser just says, go get them. Just don't fucking let up, go get them. And despite knowing what's going to happen, they just fucking walk through, and their feet get frozen. And this is just as the Animorphs finally jump out the back of the blade ship. So yeah, the Hork-Bajir controllers know that they cannot walk through this mist, but they do it anyway because they're told to. Now this doesn't seem that relevant to anything at this point, but wait till later in the book. We'll have a look. Turns out the Animorphs are way up there in the Arctic Circle. We can assume it's the Arctic Circle. Maybe yeah, I believe part of Canada's in the Arctic Circle, but they're up there where it's fucking cold and there are polar bears and shit. That's all you really need to know. And there's this station, this yurt-built site of all these corrugated steel buildings and what have you. And we can assume that this is the location that Eric spoke of. We just have to assume that, I think. Because we don't really get any... It's not made clear, really, at any point. The Animorphs have fallen out. Now, you'd think that because the Visser has seen them fall out, that he might, you know, keep the blade ship there to attack them. And there's a bit where he's shouting at them to stay down, but then the next time the Animorphs sort of get up, the blade ship's long gone. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, so Visser 3, Mr. Impulsive, Mr. I'll do anything to catch these fuckers. Right, they're now on a massive plain of ice and snow. Just whiteness that just goes on infinitely. Obviously not infinitely, but you know what I'm talking about. There, right? You can't fucking miss them. They stand out like, I don't know, like a fat man at a salad bar. And he legs it. He goes. He says, right, fuck off, I'm off that way. Why? The animals are basically on a big sheet of paper. They're not getting anywhere. Just bang, bang, bang. They're gone. I think what happens here is Visser 3, in his typical fucking complacency and cockiness, which of course has always worked for him in the past, He says, let the Vember deal with them. Oh, I am evil. I am so evil. I love fucking Kung Pao. It's a great film. It is so evil. It is a bad plan that will hurt many people that are good. I think it's great because it's so bad. I fucking love that movie. All right. I'm thinking that's what Visser 3 does. He says, we'll just let the Vember deal with them. Just like we let the wolves deal with the escapee Hawk Bajir in book 23. Funny how only a few books ago we found out that Ket Halpak, or who we thought was Ket Halpak, didn't actually die at all. So maybe I would have learnt my lesson and eliminated them myself instead of being a typical fucking Bond villain and just let somebody else do it for me whilst I turn my back and look t'other way. Fucking hell, Visser 3, you incompetent bullshit. Anyway, the Vember are these... They live in these really, really cold temperatures, and they've got ski-like feet, heads like hammerhead sharks, and they're carrying around big fucking Dracon assault cannons, which sound fucking awesome, don't they? Fucking bazooka Dracon. Awesome. The Animorphs have to fight to stay warm. Fight to stay alive. And there's a few chapters here where they're just doing that. And I tell you what, it's surprisingly effective. It really is. They've just taken the Animorphs and just chucked them into one of the most unforgiving environments. And just seeing the Animorphs interacting with each other the way that they do, it was lovely, because we've never seen them in this sort of situation before. They're constantly fighting to keep each other alive, keep each other motivated, keep each other going. And it's great. Jake does a good job as the leader, as he has done a lot recently. And all of them are doing their part just to think of ideas, think of anything they can do just to keep each other alive. And I think it was done magnificently. Jeffrey Zulk. Really well done. They're being chased down by these Vember that are coming after them. And that's happening for a few chapters. And apparently they can echolocate the Vember as well. And there's a funny part where they say, they've got really human-like torsos. And that becomes relevant later on, because Axe talks about the Vember. What he knows after saying, the Vember? But that's not possible. He finally sits down and says, okay, maybe they are possible. Here's what I know. And they were eliminated by an ancient alien race called the Five. And they were turned into liquid coolant, really. Because they melt at room temperature. And they could be used as like superconductors or whatever. And that's how they supposedly became extinct. Now, Axe does a lot of speculating from this point on. So everything that's said now is just purely speculation. It cannot, as far as I know, be confirmed. But he said that what the Yerks have probably done is travelled to Vember, which is supposedly the Vember planet, and found ancient genes of the Vember, taken it back and mutated it with humans. And the reason he gives for that, the reason he speculates that, is because humans have one of the most complicated genomes. Which, it's a really interesting concept. And one that I'm not sure if it ever gets explored again. But if it's true, what Axe is speculating, then the Yerks are taking people, we assume, and mutating them with these Vember genes and turning them into these half-human, half-Vember creations. And that's wacky. And it's horrific. Let's not forget that bit. That's horrific. I'm not sure how the Yerks do it, whether it's true, because remember, it is just Axe speculating. But I think it's a shame that I don't think we ever go into this again. We know that the Yerks do a lot of genetic manipulation. We see that later on in the books. I think we've already seen it previously. I'd have to have a good think about it to know. But yeah, that's some pretty heavy shit. And it does make you wonder, is that what they're doing out in the Arctic Circle? Breeding these Vember? Why would they be doing it? Why would they be doing it? Why the Vember? And that's something we'll ask ourselves at the end. The Animorphs now get desperate. They've decided that the best morph for them at the moment is the wolf. So they're all hanging around as wolves. Axe and Tobias. I don't know why they weren't going wolf. They were just hanging around as fleas. But they see off in the distance a polar bear grabbing a seal and just tearing it to pieces. It's quite horrific actually how it's described, because the way it's described is the polar bear pulled the seal out of a hole, but it didn't fit, so it just like shredded it out of this hole. Oh, gruesome. But there's a funny little line here, and they're all saying, oh, we really need to eat that, the remains of that, even though we don't really want to. And then Marco asks Cassie, is this okay? When did you start thinking I was some kind of fanatic? We're freezing, we're starving, and I'm going all tree hugger, never eat anything with a face on you. Marco says, well, I can never tell what you'll think. Ooh. Ooh. I read that, I thought, fuck. Marco has just said what we've all been thinking. Cassie, you have no fucking moral compass. We have no idea how you're going to react to any given situation. I think this is... I mean, everyone says that Cassie is a bit of a hypocrite. But I never remember that actually being stated in the books as a thing. I thought it was just incidental that the fans saw her as a hypocrite. But that there was Marco saying, I don't know what you're going to say because you're always changing your fucking mind. Fucking yes, Marco, pointing out Cassie's hypocrisy in the most brutal way. Awesome. I'm sorry, Cassie. I have really come to appreciate your character. No joke, you are one of my favourite characters. But goddamn, you're hypocritical sometimes. And it's nice that somebody else in the actual series has noticed that too. The Animorphs eat from this seal that the polar bears left behind, and then they find the baby seals that were nearby, and using dolphins, trap it, and then they use it, and now they've got a body that can deal with these climates, so they swim around. They swim around to go nearer to the base, which they have previously wandered away from. And just at the wrong moment, or the right moment as far as the book is concerned, they get attacked by killer whales, or orcas, however you want to call them. And those whales get scared away by none other than Derek the Inuit. Good old Derek the Inuit. What a chap. I actually do quite like Derek the Inuit. He's fun. But he comes along. And he's just seen the Animorphs demorph, and he's just like, what are you supposed to be then? He just doesn't give a shit. He just sees these and he's like, well, you're new. What brings you here? And it's great. They establish that he's not a controller. And he's talking about, he thinks they're spirit animals, and he talks about what the Yeerks are doing in this base. He obviously doesn't know they're Yeerks, but he says they're just up here killing things. Which makes you wonder, okay, so why are the Yeerks up here killing all the wildlife? Maybe because they're paranoid of Andalites. I mean, of course, that would seem sensible. Do they think that Andalites are just constantly coming at them? Maybe. They have a strict anti-wildlife policy, it seems. But then Derek, which is a great name for an Inuit, let's be honest. Derek talks about Nanuk. Nanuk, who turns out to be the polar bear they saw earlier. And he takes the Animorphs to this polar bear. And using their larger battle morphs, they subdue this polar bear, acquire the DNA, and now they all have the polar bear morph. Derek takes them back to the Yeerk station and says, there's a storm coming. Winter is coming. And fucks off. And that's all we see of Derek. Fucking Derek the Inuit. What a chap. I genuinely loved Derek. Now, I mentioned that the Yeerks seem to have this, according to Derek, this strict anti-wildlife policy. The Animorphs, as polar bears, wander in a single file into the middle of the Urk base. And the Vember don't do anything. But to be fair, as soon as a human wanders out, a human controller wanders out of the base and sees them, she says, alert, alert. And then one later says, Andalite bandits. So I'm going to take it back a bit. I do think they have a shoot all animals on sight policy, because that's probably what happened here. So that happens, and they run, and somebody shouts, program the Vember to attack. So obviously they've programmed these Vember. And they get into a quick scuffle, but by the time that scuffle starts, they're basically at this big hangar, this massive building, and they crash through the walls. One of the Vember crashes through the walls, and the Animorphs follow the Vember in. But because there's a different environment inside this hangar, it's maintained at a higher temperature, this Vember melts. It literally melts. It's like a snowman put in an oven. It's just like... So, yeah, we get that little scene, but the Animorphs all head in. And because they're programmed, because they've been ordered to attack the Andalite bandits, the Vember all go in and all suffer the same fate. And they're like zombies. They're just... So whether they're sentient is probably very debatable. They're probably not. They probably are just these programmed killing machine things. The Animorphs find 2 bug fighters and very little security. They board one of the bug fighters, shoot the other one, and out they go, out into the wilderness. And then apparently the Blade ship is intercepting them. The Blade ship is intercepting them, so they crash the bug fighter after leaving it as birds and flying home. Well, flying to a nearby truck and going home. This ending is a bit rushed, let's be honest. But let's cover that series of events a little bit more. Remember when I talked about the Hawk-Bajir just obeying the Visser's orders and walking through the mist even though they know they're going to lose their fucking feet? They just did it anyway. It's a strange parallel to what we just saw here with the Vember. The program was set to go attack them. And despite knowing that as soon as they step foot in that hangar, they're going to fucking melt and be completely useless, they just fucking wander in. And that's... I'm not sure if it's deliberate, but it's basically an exact parallel of what we saw in the Blade ship, with the Visser saying, attack, and the Hawk-Bajir just like, okay, and get their feet frozen off. And I'm not quite sure what the message is there, because we know that Yeerks, the Yeerks inside the Hawk-Bajir, aren't programmed. They have their own sense of free will and their own... I can't remember the fucking word now, but they're able to make their own decisions, and yet they do it. But the Vember apparently cannot make their own decisions. They're just programmed, and they go and do it. Is there some message, little minute message there about sometimes you don't fucking fly? What the fuck? Get lost. Fucking ruin my show. Twat. That was probably David in Morph. Little shit. Yeah, make of that what you will, because it's one of those head scratchers. Why is there that parallel made where programmed race does something suicidal, free will race also does something suicidal, both times just because an order's been given? What is the message there? I'll leave that to you to decide. And then, of course, we get the Blade ship interception. Right, so the last time we saw the Blade ship, Visser had just seen the Animorphs fall out right beside this Yeerk base. Are we to believe that not only did he fuck off from that specific scene, but he fucked off to another part of the world? Who is this bozo? I don't understand this Visser 3 character sometimes. I mean, I understand him on the level of a fictional character who's a bumbling fucking moron, but I don't understand him on a... If he was a real person, I'd say, what the fuck is wrong with you? Sort of level, sort of thing. You know what I'm talking about. Anyway, yeah, the Animorphs somehow get home. and relieved the Chi of their duty, which was to impersonate the Animorphs from the start. And then it finishes with Marco taking an extremely long, extremely hot shower. That's the book, The Extreme. What do I think of this book? Well, firstly, it's a very entertaining book. It's well written, and to my utter and genuine shock, the first ghost-written book is probably the one with the least amount of inconsistencies when taking into regard the entire series. Wow. Jeffrey Zulk has done a spiffing job. Absolutely spiffing job. Some might say that this book is a filler. How do I feel about that? I'm not too sure. I consider filler to be, it's basically Animorphs by the numbers, where they're not introduced to a particularly new scenario. They're not introduced to anything that will have repercussions later on in the series. This book, yeah, I don't think the specific plot points have major impact on the rest of the series, but seeing the Animorphs thrown into this really harsh environment and having to look out for each other and having to make rash decisions in order to survive, I think that is an important little side note in the Animorphs' journey to this date. So I'm not going to call this book a filler. I think it goes to show how close-knit the Animorphs are as a team. We've not really had one of those books yet where you just throw them into one of the worst situations where they have to really gel together, come together as a team. And I think that was this book. And that's why it's called The Extreme. It's an extreme environment. They've got to resort to extreme measures. I really appreciate it. There are a few flaws with this book. Nothing too major. I think the biggest problem with this book is Marco. For one thing, he doesn't really get any character development. It's like the last book with Cassie. There was no real character development as far as we're concerned, as far as I'm concerned. But the big problem with Marco here is that he's an exaggerated form of himself. And I think this becomes a problem with the rest of the ghost-written books. But it's only with Marco in this book. I think the other characters are done fine. I think Jeffrey has done a great job with the other characters. But it seems to me that in this book that almost every line that Marco delivers has to have some form of joke in it or some form of sarcasm. Several sections of this book, I felt that. It felt like every single time Marco says something, it's a joke. And I know he jokes a lot, and that's part of his role. And you'd expect in an extreme circumstance he would bring on that role more. But throughout the entire book, every line is a punchline. And it just feels a bit... his character is too exaggerated at times. But as far as the book is concerned, I think that's the biggest flaw. And it's not that big of a flaw. I mean, it's quite a big flaw, but it's not that big of one. Regarding the Chi and the whole satellite thing. We got the talk at the start from Eric saying how this is a big Kandrona satellite and it's going to beam Kandrona to every body of water around the world and it's going to be this big problem. And yet we don't know where it is. Great, thanks Eric. I've discussed Eric as a double agent before. He led the Animorphs into the Blade ship. Whether he knew it would be a 3.5-hour journey, we don't know. But he sent them on a mission into the Visser's Blade ship with the Visser there, en route to a location where they would be completely stranded, near enough, where it was brutally harsh conditions. And there were these Vember aliens that he did not talk about. Remember, he got the information that this was a facility sending out Kandronas. Apparently, he didn't mention anything about the Vember, which seems to be the primary purpose. I mean, I'm not sure. What is the primary purpose of this Yerk facility? Because it's never explained, except if you just take Eric's word for it. But we've seen how great Eric's word was in the past. Yeah, the Animals blow up a satellite at the end, but it's a throwaway one-liner. It's never explained what this satellite is doing, what it's for. I think we're just supposed to assume as a reading audience, oh, that was the satellite mentioned at the start that projects Kandrona rays to every body of water in the world. How would that work? Because a satellite like that, you would require Yerk satellites worldwide, around the entire globe, to reflect those satellite beams from this one satellite. Satellite will be pointing in one direction. It just doesn't seem plausible. Forgive me, it doesn't seem plausible. For this to work, the Yeerks would need many satellites in orbit around the Earth. By this point in history, I'm pretty sure Earth had many satellites in the system that would probably see Yeerk satellites. Forgive me for looking at technology only, 20 years in the past. It wasn't that primitive compared to what it is today. Yeah, I don't see it, Eric. I don't see this being this Kandrona thing. What are the Vember there for if not for that? Fuck knows. You've also got to ask the question then of, if this was this massive project where they're going to turn every body of water into a Yeerk pool, why is it so crummily defended? The Animorphs just fucking walked in and stole a bug fighter. How? I mean, I know Vista 3's incompetent, but put a fucking bear trap in the doorway. You know, put a lock on your... It's Keygate again. They just walk into a bug fighter. Lock the fucking doors if you're not going to have security guarding the fucker. Why did none of these human controllers fire their Dracon beams? For such a massive, world-beating project as a Kandrona-spewing satellite dish, it's not very well defended, is it? It could be that, assuming my Eric is a double agent thing is the case here, or that Eric just doesn't have a fucking clue what he's talking about. We know that the Yeerks are trying to invade other planets at this time, like Lyra, for example. Maybe they're producing Vember so that they can then go and invade another planet which is of a similar atmosphere to what Vembir was. And it makes sense. Forget the DNA of the Vember, bring it down to Earth, combine it with the human DNA so that you actually get the human Vember hybrids, and keep them in the Arctic Circle where they can survive without having to be contained. Build an army of them by having this big facility. Have the satellite dish there to, you know, have communications with the pool ship, what have you. And then when you've got an army, send them up to the planet you so desire. That seems like a much more reasonable and plausible explanation for what is going on in the Arctic Circle, because I really do not buy the whole everybody's swimming pool is going to be a Kandrona thing. As far as I'm concerned, Eric was just like, right, we know that this Vember thing is going on. Why don't we just tell the Animorphs to go seek out a Kandrona satellite thing and send them into the complete unknown. See how well they do. Who knows? Maybe they'll die, maybe they won't. The Chi, what a mystery. The Chi, what a mystery. Must be a song somewhere that goes like that. Anyway, well, the scores for this book. Jake, great leadership for the most part, but the fact that you just went into this thing fucking gung-ho, despite the fact that Eric has let you down before with information, and just going for it without really a decent plan going into it, that's a pretty fatal error. I'm going to give him 6 out of 10 for this one. Great moments, but that's a really bad error to just dive into the unknown without a plan like that. Trusting somebody who has let you down previously before without gaining any more information. Okay? Bad move. Apart from that, you're all right. So you get a 6. The book itself, I'm going to give it a 9. It's not a 10. I think the whole problem of Marco being a bit of an exaggerated form of himself was a bit of a letdown. It's not really that impactful for the rest of the series, but it's got good character moments and it shows the team working well together, and just in general, it was an entertaining read. Really good stuff. I loved Derek the Inuit. What a chap. And yeah, great. 9 out of 10. Love it. Great book. And for the first ghost written book, really is an A-star from me. Lovely. Next book is going to be the next cycle. So remember, we've got another cycle video coming up after this review. And then after that cycle review, we're going to talk about The Attack, which is book 26. We're going back to Jake, who is at the moment, my favourite character. He's up there in the rankings. So that's the next one. If you like fan fiction, check out mine. This is the first of them. Animorphs, The Interrogation, book 55, and I'm up to 64. So if you get any spare time to go read stuff, that is what you must go read. Okay? Right. In that case, I'll see you next time. Ta-ra.